Being a mother, that's one thing. But being a mother of a kid with special needs, that's what we are going to talk about for this episode.
All right. So, of course, for everyone, you already know me as the person behind Bits and Pieces, Ginagmayo Ginagko podcast. And I'm very glad and happy that I'll be joined tonight by a very, a very rock star, I should say, as what I've mentioned her the last time that we were speaking with, that she's indeed a rock star because we'll be talking about a very special love for this episode. And yes, as I have introduced myself, she will be introducing herself as well. So I'll give the floor to you, Kara.
Hi guys, I'm so happy to be here. I'm Carolee Garrison, and there's a lot about me. I'm a singer-songwriter. I also have a podcast called Seeking
Mm-hmm.
Sunshine, and I actually have three special needs kids, and they are amazing and wild, and they're everything.
So, yep, as what Kara mentioned, she has kids that are of special needs, and this is going to be the point of our conversation for this episode. So, for this podcast, Kara, I actually, since I'm a believer in trifactor, I always do things in three. So I'll have like more or less three questions. If I have follow up questions, that doesn't count. So that just three major questions that I have for you, and then later on we'll just be going to tackle like at least three also myths that I've seen online or stereotypes about kids that are having special needs. And let's go through with it with
All
my
right.
first question. All right. So, first, because we're very protective as a parent, as a mother, when did you realize, Kara, that it is the time that you are going to ask help, most especially with what you have seen or you have observed from your child? At what point did you realize that this is something that you need to consult a specialist of what your child is really showing, like the behavior that you have seen?
It's more of like a slow dawning, especially because my oldest is really so all three of my kids are on the autism spectrum. So I guess I should kind
Mm-hmm.
of clarify like what their special needs are because depending on, what they are, it's a different experience, right? And so I have three kids on the autism spectrum. My oldest and my youngest are very high functioning, and then my second is very severely autistic. He's my most severe. He's my one who will be with me, right, for the rest of his life. He's the one who needs a lot of caretaking because he's not just severely autistic and semi-verbal, he's also type 1 diabetic. And then my oldest and my
Mm-hmm.
youngest are they're very verbal. They just struggle with kind of executive functioning and maybe controlling their emotions and those
Mm-hmm.
those kind of things, right? And so my oldest is my only girl. And so when she
Mm-hmm.
was, 2.5 and she was struggling with her words, she had some words, but she wasn't quite as verbal as maybe she could have been. My mother was going, my mother was a school teacher and she's going, I taught school. This isn't quite right. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
no, I think she's all right. And my
Yeah,
mom was
yeah.
going, no, something's not quite right. And so I took my daughter to the doctor and I was like, okay, something's not quite right here. And the doctor was like, all right, I guess we can put her into speech. And I was like, well, hold up. My son, who's 18 months old, and my daughter was 2.5 at the time. And I was like, my son's not talking at all. And the doctor
Mm, mm.
completely dismissed my son, completely wrote him off. My son didn't start talking till he was 7. And he's
Oh.
much more severe than my daughter. And we ended up not going the speech therapy route immediately. We ended up going into early education or early childhood development kind of
Mm,
therapy and both of them in. And so it was more of a slow realization as we were able to get
mm.
my daughter some services and some help. When it was like, oh, she does qualify, it was like, oh, if she
Mm,
qualifies, then my son definitely qualifies because he was so much more severe. And then as we started accepting, because my daughter actually got diagnosed with autism within 6 months of us kind of having this, like, oh, she's not,
uh-huh.
she's not typical. And then she was diagnosed with autism, and we kind of were really resistant to that diagnosis
Mhm.
because we were new parents. She was 3, and it was really hard to take. We didn't really embrace that diagnosis when she got it, and it was hard. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but when she got that diagnosis, it was like really obvious that our son had autism. So it took a long time for us to embrace that diagnosis for her, and to come to terms with it.
Mhm. Well, I think that would be totally understandable, especially
Yeah.
myself as a mother. We always feel like our son, our daughters are doing something this because they are a child, and we think that there is nothing that needs to be examined or probably needs to be consulted into a doctor, because we always feel like for myself, I always feel like every child is really special in the way how
Yeah.
they are developing, and that's the reason why I always think that there's nothing wrong with every child. That's for me.
Well,
That's
and because she's a girl, girls tend to really mask autism. Autism tends to be very, very
mm,
difficult to
that's
diagnose.
interesting.
Yes, autism's classically difficult to diagnose in women, in girls. And it's
Mm-hmm.
as a result, it's actually very underdiagnosed in
Mm,
females across the board. And actually, all of the diagnostic materials that have been written, the DSM 5 and all of its previous versions and subsequent versions, although I hope they are working on it, it was geared toward boys. They used
oh.
boys to write it. I've studied it since then. It was written for boys. It was not written for girls. There are so many girls, and this is a topic I'm really passionate about because my daughter Aurora, she's actually turns 13 at the end of this month. So this has been a
Wow.
long journey. She's had 5 different diagnoses. I mean, I think
Mm,
I think 4 of them were autism, and one of them was social pragmatic communication disorder, which is basically
mm,
autism, except for it's missing one of like one little behavior component of the like
mm-mm,
the DSM 5 has 3 components, and then or the DSM 4 had 4 components, and then the DSM 5 changed it to 3. And I can go into it if you want, but we don't need to right now, of like what the actual criteria are for being diagnosed with autism. And she was missing like one of the legs, if you want to go that way of.
mm,
And it's been a journey because girls are misdiagnosed all the time. They are misdiagnosed with anxiety and with mood disorders because girls mask it in a way that boys just do not. My son Joshua, who is 14 months younger than Aurora, has had
mm.
one diagnosis and nobody has questioned it once. Aurora has had 5.
That's pretty interesting. Have you, yeah, have you ever asked probably like doctors or expert if what is the reason why it's being geared or really for men or for boys
It's
for
just
that.
it's just more obvious. The
Mm,
those the So the criteria to be diagnosed with autism in the DSM 5, which I want to say that they're coming. When I studied the DSM 5, it was a good few years ago. It was like 2015-ish, so it was a good few years ago. So
mm-hmm,
I'm a little outdated from when I studied it, and I want
mm-hmm,
to say that they've come out with the DSM 6 since then. So forgive me for being a little outdated, but in the DSM 5, which many people, when they got their diagnoses or their children did, like that's what they use. It has there's 2 main components that are each split
mm-hmm,
into two, and there's the behavior side, which is, and it's been a long time since I've gone through this. There's the behavior side, which is sensory integration, um,
mm-hmm,
like like there's eating things where it's like being really picky and like not wanting to eat things, and then there's sensory where it's like I can't stand tags on my clothes and I can't stand the lights and I can't
mm,
stand.
all
There's
right.
sensory processing disorder type things, and then there's behavior where it's tantrums and
Mm-mm,
outbursts and stuff, and
mm-hmm,
there is social behavior, and then the other side of that is social behavior and speech. So
mm-hmm,
social behavior is like not understanding social cues and how to behave in public. And then
mm-hmm,
there's understanding speech and being able to speak at all. So those are kind of the areas that they look for when they're diagnosing autism. Girls tend to be able to copy Whether or not they actually understand is a
Mm-hmm.
completely different story, but they can copy
Mm.
better than boys can. Girls can mirror what they see around them, and boys, whether even if they're missing that key ingredient of actually understanding what they're seeing, whereas
Mm.
boys just do what they understand. Does that make sense?
Mm.
And
So
so yeah,
yeah,
so my
I pretty
daughter,
much. Mhm.
yeah, she struggles with executive functioning skills, and she struggles with understanding all of these, like, you know, critical social skills. And so she tries to copy, but as she gets older, it's really clear that she's missing like some of these social skills where she's like, she just doesn't understand.
Mm, that's pretty interesting, actually. And if I compare it to here in our country in Philippines, this is something that I've observed, most especially that kids that are under the spectrum are being diagnosed really late because of in Philippines mostly the parents are really something that very protective with their child. And I mean, not just in Philippines, I observe it's mostly like the maternal and the parents' instinct to really be protective with each of their children. However, it's always being diagnosed late because the doors are not being opened with this idea yet, very much when it comes to Philippines, because there's always like a stereotype that these kids
Yeah.
cannot be handled, that these kids are all of the kids that are part of the spectrum are all difficult to deal with. So those are the things that are actually happening here in Philippines. But slowly the doors are opening, so I have friends who are really like if they had this idea that this that their kids is behaving or probably like having a delayed speech, they usually, for right now, as what I observe, I have friends that are really open up into consulting like developmental doctors, speech doctors, and all those things. But when it comes to the idea of kids that are under the spectrum, sometimes they really just shrug it off, most especially because they are sending their children into daycares, and then that's the point that they realized when mostly the teachers are the one telling them that this your kid needs to be diagnosed or to be consulted with an expert regarding this matter. So I
Yeah.
guess
Well, and
that's
well, here's what I can tell you with that. I have 3 kids on the spectrum, and my husband believes that he's on the spectrum, and he doesn't have an official diagnosis, but it's pretty clear
mm,
that he's also on the spectrum, which took him a long time to come to terms with that. But what I could tell you is like, it's a huge spectrum. It
mm,
is a very big spectrum. And what that means is like, there's no good or bad. It's just such a
mm,
huge range. I mean, I have a high functioning kid who's got really, really tough behaviors. Sometimes, and sometimes my low functioning kid is the sweetest and easiest kid there is.
mm.
And then my high functioning daughter is so like, she's so sweet and well behaved most of the
Oh,
time. Like, she's almost never had like behavior issues. She wants to read all the time. That's all she wants to do
oh,
for her whole life. She just wants to read. She is so like
that's so cute.
easygoing. Her hardest thing is she wants to please everybody all the time. Like, we have to
Mm,
work. We had her in autism therapy to help her learn how to stand up for herself, especially against her
mm.
little brother, who is the dominant force. Her little brother,
Oh
who's
my
4
god.
years younger than her, who is
Uh-huh.
the dominant force in that
Oh my
relationship.
god, that's pretty interesting because we.
They, sorry, there's this expression that when you've met one kid with autism, you've met one kid with autism. So
Mhm.
that stigma, it yeah, it's around, but it needs to be dissolved because they're all very, very different. And I like to look
Yeah.
at an autism diagnosis as a tool, because
Mm,
I'm in the US, and it's, at first I was so afraid of having that diagnosis, but for us it was a tool to be able to get the services, to get the therapies and the things that my kids needed to help them.
mhm, mhm. Well, I think actually you were right about those things that it's a huge spectrum that if you are going to study it and we don't even know for ourselves that we might be part of that spectrum, but we need an expert to be able to identify that. However, oh my god, your daughter is so cute. Y- that's very cute to handle. And also, like, for me, if I would be that person, I would be the mother. I would never be able to identify that my daughter is behaving that way, because I think that's just so pure. Like, every child is really
Yeah.
very special the way they are.
Well, and one thing that, so we've done a decade of this behavior therapy
Mm-hmm.
called ABA, which is applied behavior analysis.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been really intensive. But the whole point of it is to look at the behavior, and there's a lot of debate around this around this kind of
Yeah.
therapy. But the whole point of it is to figure out why the child is doing the behavior, because
Mm-mm.
they're not doing the behavior to hurt you. They're
Yeah.
doing, like, their behavior has a reason. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times that reason, at least for my kiddos, like that reason a lot of times is anxiety. I have my
Mm.
severely autistic kiddo, when he gets really upset, he will start hitting himself. He will start slapping himself in
Mm.
the face when he is not getting what he wants. And there's just no, like, he right now he's obsessed with DVDs, which sucks because we could stream all of the movies he wants. All he wants is the DVDs. And then he destroys them in about 2 days. He scratches them
Uh-huh.
all up, and it's like we could stream all of them, but all he wants is the hard copy of the DVD, and
Uh-huh.
he ruins
Uh-huh.
them in 2 days, and then they won't work anymore, and then he wants a new one, and I'm like, what? And then he'll get
Yeah.
really upset, and he'll start like chewing up his hand, slapping himself, and he'll just,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just that anger and that frustration, and he doesn't have any way to let it out, and he'll start kicking things and hurting himself. And my
Mm.
other two, they also don't know how to express that
Mm-hmm.
anxiety and frustration and anger, and so they have their ways, like all of us do. Our
Yeah,
behaviors.
yeah.
I actually I've actually never used this quote in this context before, but I love this quote from Frozen, and it is,
Uh-huh.
people make bad choices when they're mad or scared or stressed. We are all people trying
That's
to
true.
figure out how to appropriately work through and process our emotions. Just like our autistic kids are trying to work through and process their emotions. And as their parents, we are trying to teach them how to do that. And the first thing we have to do is learn how to do that ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to teach ourselves how to work through and process our own emotions so that
That's
we
true.
can
That's
then
true.
teach them how to work through and process their emotions.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's also very difficult, most especially, and also for us, we're always like the mirror of what our kids or will be seeing around us. Like, it's so funny. Yesterday, my little one was actually very frustrated because I was hiding his guitar because the guitar was being put in a corner, and he usually like sneak on me, and I don't know where he is if I'm calling and he never replied to me. So I decided to really just hide the guitar. So what he did, he actually slapped his father.
Oh
So
no!
I was so shocked because he's typically, if he's really angry, he would just throw things into some, like, not really to specific person, but if he's really like holding something in his hand, and if he's frustrated of what I am doing, would throw it away. But this time he slapped his father. So I actually grabbed him in the corner and asked him and told him that he needs to say sorry and all those things. Like, really, it's difficult for us parents, but day by day we also learn things. It's
Yeah.
not just like we process our own emotions because we experience it, but we also learn those things coming from our kids. It doesn't matter if our kids is part of the spectrum or not, but they are also
Mhm.
teaching us a lot of things, really. Like,
Yeah,
I'm really amazed.
there is nothing like motherhood
Yeah.
to teach you just how in control of your emotions you actually
Uh-huh.
are. Because
That's true. That's true.
motherhood will push you to your very limits. I mean, I it just will. I think I stepped in spaghetti sauce and it got between my toes yesterday, and it just taught me how calm I
Mhm.
really was that day, which was not very calm.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting story. So, yeah, I guess we're good with my first question. Though there are a lot of follow ups about it, Kara. But I'm happy I was able to get the best that I can share, especially to those people who are also experiencing or having this kind of situation at home. So I'll jump in right away with my second question here. So, with all the diagnosis that you have had with your children, how are you able to deal, like, let's say, for example, the misconception, the stereotypes of the people that are, I should say, those people were really not knowledgeable when it comes to these things. That's why they were able to jump into those conclusions. How are you able to deal those matters?
I think I've been pretty blessed. I don't think I've had
Mm.
too many people. I could tell you that it's really well, and I don't need to tell you or anybody else who's listening to this that it's isolating, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
No one, this is not shocking news to anybody probably who's listening, that it is isolating to have kids with special needs. I think that we
mm,
all know that. And as soon as you dive into this world, it's like, oh, you suddenly are just on an island and that's about it.
mm,
And maybe it's because I have, a Joshua. I have a severely autistic who's really obvious about it, like
mm-hmm.
really obvious. And I mean to the
Yeah,
degree
I've
of
met
he's
Joshua, but he's so
oh yes,
adorable.
he's adorable. But I mean, like he had an eye doctor appointment yesterday because he wears glasses and he's 11, so he's
Mm-hmm.
not like a little 2-year-old. This is a big boy. He's 11, right? And he
Uh-huh.
went to the eye doctor and he had his eyes dilated, which is just a normal checkup thing. And we were sitting in the
Mm-hmm.
lobby waiting for 20 minutes while we did this thing. And this little like 4-year-old boy goes, "Hi," and he was like, "No," because he's Joshua. And the little kid was like, "What?" And I was like, "Joshua, say hi." And he was like, "No."
Uh-huh. Oh no.
And I was trying to get him to say hi, and these little ladies were like, "Oh, I love your boots," and he was like, "No."
Oh no, he's not having it.
And he's like, and he starts telling me his joke. It's just so funny because it's really obvious. It's really obvious. It takes very little interaction with my son to be like, "Oh, that kid has autism." It's not a
Mm.
secret. It's not. It doesn't take a whole lot to like dawn on you that this child has special needs. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
might you might be clued in just from the visuals of like his backwards
Mm-hmm.
shirt and his backwards underwear and boots that
That's
are
so
way
cute.
oversized. Like it doesn't take much. Um, so at least with him, it clicks right away. And then my other
Mm.
two are high functioning enough that most people are not gonna know. Most
Mm.
most people, it you won't know at all. In fact, I mean, my poor daughter is just sort of the weird kid, which I hate to say that, but like she's just sort of the socially awkward one. Most of her
Mm-hmm.
friends don't really get that she has autism. They just kind of are like, she's just kind of weird. They just don't really get
Mm-hmm.
it, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. So they just sort of fall onto these opposite ends where it's
Mm-hmm.
either really obvious or really not obvious. And that sort of
Mm-hmm.
falls true for both their peers and for other parents,
Mm.
right? As well as, church leaders and teachers and whoever they come across. And so I've only had, I can only think of like one experience
Mm-hmm.
where I came across a stranger who was like, "Oh, I need to spank that out of them." And I was like so shocked by that statement.
Mm-hmm.
Like, really? Because like I spanked my kid once and he kept asking me to do it more because he thought it was fun. Like that
Mm.
obviously didn't work. Like, why would you ever think like he thought it was fun, he thought it was enjoyable, and he kept like putting his butt
Oh.
out to be like, "Spank me more, mom. That was fun. Do it again." Like, no, it doesn't work like that.
Mm.
You obviously have met zero kids with autism. Like, we tried that
Mm.
exactly one time, and it was zero amount effective.
Mm.
So, um, and like my we lived blocks from my parents when my
Mm-mm.
oldest two were diagnosed, so like they knew all of the things. They were right there with
Mm.
us. And then right after that we moved and we lived blocks away from my in-laws, and so they were right there with us for the next 4 years. And so it's like my parents and my in-laws, they lived it with us
Mm.
when my kids were little. Like, so there's no big shock with any of the grandparents,
Mm,
and so I guess I just feel really blessed that we didn't have to deal with that.
mm,
And as far as like mommy friends and that kind of judgment, I haven't had a lot of close mommy friends. I can tell you
mm-hmm.
I did have a good close mom friend, and I guess we're still close mom friends that just haven't talked in 3 months because of something actually that she did. She had a big party for her kid, and she called me and asked me if I would come and get a babysitter for my kids because she thought my kids would ruin her kid's party. And this was a kids
uh,
party for kids,
mm-hmm.
because of my kids and who they
Mm,
are and their special needs. And so
mm-hmm.
that hurt a lot.
Yeah,
um,
that
so
sucks.
yeah, so that sucks. But overall, there's just really only like a couple of experiences I could even think of.
Mm,
Overall, there's just not been a lot. And maybe
mm-hmm.
that's because of the nature of this whole beast and it being so isolating that we kind of put ourselves in a bubble to protect ourselves.
That's true. Actually, I'm also happy to hear what you've mentioned, Kara, that this is not very common to really treat people, the special people that are especially you as a mother, to treat you differently there in your country, because at some point here especially is always a connotation for Asian countries that if you ask help, that's a taboo or something that you're incapable to do with. But slowly, as the doors are opening up for us already, there's an available doctors, specialists that could help us and diagnose. That's one thing also that I'm happy. But the stigma here in Philippines, it's pretty like still really present. But I wish in the future we'll be moving back and like progress in the way how we are dealing with these matters, most especially. So
Yeah,
yeah,
well,
that's
and I do want to mention that, like, school wise, are you familiar with an IEP, an individualized education plan, in the school system?
For Philippines, it was not really a highlight, most especially. Normally,
So
for there's just a different like center or school for them.
yeah, so I have all three of my kids are on IEPs, and have been for at least the vast majority of their schooling. And I've been, really blown away. All of my kids' teachers have been amazing. They've
Oh,
all they've all loved him so much, even as they've had really difficult times.
mm,
Joshua's definitely had his difficult moments. He's my severely autistic, low functioning kiddo. And all of his teachers have just
mm,
loved him so, so much. But even my youngest, um, he's kind of a unique case. My
mm,
oldest, who were diagnosed right when they turned 3, my youngest was not diagnosed till he was like 6 or 7 as
mm,
as having autism. For a really long time, I was just kind of told, "Oh no, he's typical," and I was like, "No, he's not typical. You don't understand how hard this kid is." And it was like no one believed me, and he was the
oh,
hardest toddler ever. Um, he eventually got an ADHD diagnosis, then he got an ODD diagnosis,
uh-huh.
if you're familiar with that, which is oppositional defiance disorder. And
Yeah,
then I
yeah.
finally got him an autism evaluation, and his ODD diagnosis was changed to something called PDA, which is actually,
Mm,
I don't know if it's out there or not. It started in the UK, and it's just brand new in the States out here.
mm-hmm.
It stands for pathological demand avoidance disorder.
Oh, that's the
And
first thing I've heard this one.
yeah, it fits my son to a T. Pathological demand avoidance disorder. And it's basically ODD, but like anxiety based. So
Mm,
basically, but it falls into the autism spectrum. So like, we were able to get services, but ABA was like, nah, he's too hard. We can't handle this,
mm.
and kind of quit our whole family. Uh, so So after a decade of ABA, we lost ABA because my youngest kind of struggles with big violent outbursts. And
Mm,
yeah, he's 8, and it's been a journey. So he's very high functioning, and he's very
mm-mm.
verbal, and he struggles with big violent outbursts. And so in school, he's very smart. He's very, on par with all of
Mm,
his grade level, but he was having these big, dangerous kind of behaviors at school. And
mm,
we had to move him to, I didn't even know it existed until we had to, take this route. But apparently they
mhm,
have something called a behavior unit just for kiddos who have violent behaviors, who are not low functioning.
mm.
Yeah.
That's a good thing that this one has been
Yeah.
offered.
So they had that. And, I was very nervous about the whole thing. And those teachers were incredible with
Mm,
him. They were amazing with him. And he's now actually was in that class for about a year. And now he's back in a typical classroom and he's doing pretty well. He hasn't had any more violent outbursts.
mhm.
He's got a lot of frenemies, but he does not he's not had any more violent outbursts. His teacher's a saint. Probably losing all her hair over him, but
Yeah,
um,
that's
yeah. So we've been really, really blessed that my kiddos have had amazing teachers.
that's perfect, and that's good to hear also. So,
Yeah,
I'm kind of like jumping onto the last portion of my
yeah.
question here, most especially. So, um, you mentioned this one already with the supports. What are specifically the things? Let's say, for example, let's have the person that are around you, your in-laws and your parents specifically. What are the things that they support you when it comes to having or handling your children that are under the spectrum, Kara? Like they support you in every step of the way, as you mentioned, but can you like cite an example in which you can say that parents or your in-laws are really the most helpful person that you can always stop in case whatever happens?
Okay. So, for several years, we lived
Mm-hmm.
near my parents,
Mm-hmm.
and they were very helpful. And
Mm-hmm.
then we moved, and we lived near my in-laws for several years,
Mm-hmm.
and they were very helpful. And then we moved, and now we don't live near either. And for the last 4 years, we have not lived near either of them. And so we
Mm-hmm.
actually don't live near anybody right now. And we do not have any family
Uh-huh.
or really any support like that right
Oh.
now. So for the last, well, and the truth of the matter is that um, about 4 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
Joshua, who is very, very, very high needs, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And since
Mm-hmm.
that has happened, now both my parents and my in-laws are no longer willing slash feel capable of caring for him.
So that's the reason why you were
So
moving not
no,
closer
that's
to them.
that's not why. It's we just
Mm-hmm.
have we actually moved to finish our degrees at college, and we moved to a different state,
Mm.
and then he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. It just kind of happened that way, and it was
Mm.
it was actually kind of a really crazy, miraculous journey. We moved here, and then within like a month, he nearly died, and he was
Oh
hospitalized for
my
a few
God.
days. No, it's a crazy journey. Like it was wild, and he was 7 years old. It was fall of 2018. We moved here in August,
Mm.
and in the beginning of October, he suddenly got really, really sick. He suddenly lost a bunch of weight overnight, and at the
What?
time he was 7 years old, and he actually was completely and utterly nonverbal. He didn't
Mm-hmm.
have a single word. He didn't have a single that like meant anything, nothing at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then he woke up one morning and was just skin and bones. Like he looked like death, and
What? That's terrible.
it was horrific. He was actually in diabetic ketoacidosis, but I didn't know that. I didn't know
Yeah.
anything about type 1 diabetes at all. And I thought he just kind of had the flu. And so we didn't really do much. And then a couple days later, he was still looking really off. So I took him to the doctor, and she was like,
Mm.
oh, and actually, I took him to the doctor, and he was so weak that I had to
Mm-hmm.
carry him in. And this
Mm.
is my kid who bounces off the walls all day long, like so hyper all the time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to carry him into the office because he was so weak he couldn't stand up on his own. And she didn't even look at him. She was like, nah, he's just got a stomach bug. And I was like, no, no, no,
What?
no. This is serious. And she was like,
Yeah.
well, we could do blood work, but like he has autism. It's really hard to get blood from a kid with autism. So like I'm pretty sure it's just a stomach bug. So just give it a few more days. And
Oh my God.
at that time, my husband and I were both full-time college students because we had just
Hmm.
gone back to college to finish our
You
degrees.
are indeed a rock star, Kara.
Oh no, this is such a story. It's like a mind-blowing story. We were both full-time college students. We had Joshua who was 7, Aurora who was 8, and Benjamin who must have been 4. So they were
Mm-hmm.
all 3 in school, and both of us were college students, and we had just moved like a month before.
Oh my God.
And we just moved away from
That's
family, and
intense.
my husband was disabled, like officially disabled. Like he walked on a cane, he could barely
Mm-hmm.
move, he was collapsing all the time because his
Oh my
disability
God,
is actually, it's called
it's so intense.
yeah, it was actually a familial episodic ataxia, and he would shake really bad and collapse. Anyways, he could barely like make it across campus. He'd have to stop and rest. And so a couple days after I took him to the hospital, a couple days after I took him to the doctor, and she just blew us
Mm-hmm.
off. My husband and I were like trading back and forth of like
Mm-hmm.
who was staying home with the sick kid and who was missing classes because like we were both in college. And my husband
Mm-mm.
sent me this picture of him laying in bed, and he looked like drastically worse. And I was in class when he sent me the
Uh-huh.
picture, and I was like, no, I'm done watching my kid die in front of my eyes. I'm done with
Mm-hmm.
it. And I took him to the ER, and they were like, this kid's dying of type 1 diabetes. We need to check his blood right now. And it took
Mm-hmm.
like a bunch of different teams of like grown men holding my dying kid down because my kid who couldn't stand up and walk on his own because he
Mm-hmm.
was so weak was fighting so hard that it took a bunch of adult grown men holding him down to get a little drop
But
of blood
still
out of
very
his finger.
strong.
Yeah, so strong, so strong. 7-year-old kid uh, get one little drop of blood from his finger, and as soon as they got that drop of blood, it was like, oh, type 1 diabetes. So
Mm-hmm.
they sent us to a different hospital that was bigger, and he was hospitalized for 3 days while they did insulin, and they gave us all of the like crazy. He basically slept for like 3 days, and they gave me all the education. Like, okay, here's all of the insulin knowledge you'll ever need, and it was like super overwhelming. And I was like what is
Yeah.
happening right now? And I was so in such a state of shock that I was like, you guys don't understand. Any second now, this kid is gonna like come back to himself and demolish this hospital. Like, you don't know who this kid is. He's gonna change the passwords on all your computers and turn the language to Japanese. Like, this kid's gonna destroy your hospital. This is my worst nightmare come true. Is Joshua being in the hospital. But they were amazing, and they like had a nurse like stand guard so I could sleep at night.
Uh-huh.
And they had to keep checking his blood sugar
Mm-hmm.
with a little needle like every 30 minutes, but they didn't have a huge team of guys to hold him down, so they just had me, and he kept like tearing chunks of my hair out, and it was awful. And
Oh my God.
whatever. So we made it home eventually, and like it was crazy. And then we sent him back to school. And this is my kid who he was 7, and I was
Mm.
never gonna potty train him because like that's the hardest thing in the whole world. Like you could
Mm.
never be potty trained. And then when he was 4, he like stood on the bathtub and peed into the toilet from the edge of the bathtub.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, I guess I better potty train you now. So he was pee potty trained, but we couldn't poop potty train him because he wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
eat anything. So he was like chronically underweight. And like we had
Mm.
tried all these meds to get him to eat and like increase his appetite, and he wouldn't eat. And he had like this crazy allergic reaction to these meds to try to get him to eat. So he'd already been underweight before all of this,
Mm.
but he wouldn't eat. And so we couldn't potty train him because he was pooping regularly. So he was still
Mm.
pooping in his like underwear and his pants all the time because he wouldn't eat. So then when he went back to school, so he was in the hospital Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and we came home like Friday afternoon. And then when he went to school on Monday morning, he pooped in the toilet for the first time in his life because
Oh.
there's this thing right after you get diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, there's this honeymoon phase because this kid's been starving
Mm-hmm.
for so long because with type 1 diabetes, you haven't been getting any of the sugar
Mm.
because the blood sugar hasn't been, the sugar goes into your blood, but not into like where it needs to go. It just
Mm-hmm.
floats around in your blood instead. That's why your blood sugar is
Mm.
so high. It doesn't go into your actual like organs.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're starving. And so Joshua, who would eat nothing before, suddenly was still really picky. All he would eat was corn dogs, but he was eating like 9 corn dogs a day. So he was suddenly eating. So he was suddenly pooping. So just like
Ah.
that, pooping in the potty regularly, like just like
Oh.
that. And we'd been doing, I mean, 4 hours a day of ABA therapy for
Mm-hmm.
like so many years. For like 4 years, we'd been doing tons and tons and tons of therapy, so much therapy, and his speech had not improved at
Mm-hmm.
all. No improvement in speech. Within a month of being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, he could say all of his colors. And
Wow.
from that moment on, his speech skyrocketed. And as you heard the other day when he was home, he never shuts up now. He talks all the time. And I cannot do interviews when he is home because he's constantly telling me jokes. His jokes right now are cords, 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 mountain, cords, sandwich, ew, or something like that.
Oh,
He
that's so adorable.
talks constantly. So it's been 4 years, and most
It's so
people,
silly.
yeah, he talks all the time, and like he's not had a weight problem ever since. He's
Mm.
not had a, he eats well. He's amazing. It's been like such a crazy miracle that
Yeah, that's true.
Joshua was
That's true.
diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And so like, yeah, it was awful and so hard. And like, yeah, we have to stick that kid with a needle multiple times a day to keep him alive. I have to watch every single bite of food that kid takes. But you know
Oh,
what? He can talk now, and it's amazing.
yeah, yeah. It's been amazing to know to actually hear that story, Kara. And oh my God, that's a very, very like difficult situation, but you it comes out really something huge after. So
Yeah,
this is a very good.
it's changed the way I look at everything.
Yeah, yeah.
It's changed
It's
my
mind
perspective
blowing.
on like all of life. Like every time that I have any sort of challenge, I'm like, wait a minute, what's possible now?
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
What could possibly be topping that situation that you've had with? That's mind blowing. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I guess thank you, Carol, for sharing that story. I know that's something that is very special for you, and especially because it changes a lot, especially with how Joshua is dealing with things, and also you as a mother, most importantly. So, I'll
Yeah. Well,
just be
and it
going.
sorry,
Mm-hmm.
and it helps me so much to be patient with him because
Mm,
as a special needs parent, there's a lot of opportunities where I'm
yeah.
like, oh, that kid is screaming at me, or that kid has said the same thing to me 100,000 times today, or
Mm.
he's at, because what his favorite thing to do is to ask me for things that like are impossible. Like, how about mom? I want to go to the beach today, and I'm like, we live 2,000 miles from the beach. The beach is not really possible to happen today because we went to the beach for spring break in
Uh-huh.
April. So now he's like, hello, we need to go to the beach every day. And I'm like, okay, but
Wow.
we can't do that. Like I
Joshua
can't.
can come here. The beach is just a walking distance from my place.
Right. So my parents live in California and they live like 10 minutes from the beach. So we went and visited them for spring break. Right. And so now
Oh.
he's like, I want to go to the beach all the time. And I'm like, that's awesome. Me too. But he gets really upset because we can't go to the beach all the time. And it's like, awesome.
That's so
He
cute.
wants to do that. But then he'll, so it's like, I have to remind myself every day, I'm so grateful for his voice. I'm so grateful that he can tell me and then express his anger that he doesn't get to go to the
Yeah.
beach today.
Which is pretty much a miracle, especially that
Yeah,
he's
it
been
is.
diagnosed as really the different diagnosis with the rest of the other high functioning kids that you have.
Well, and
Interesting.
I had completely given up on him talking. Like just before
Mm,
that whole thing happened, I was like, my kid's 7. I cannot keep hoping that he's going to talk. I have to
mm,
give up on this. It's breaking my heart to keep hoping
mm.
that this kid's going to talk. He's 7. we've been through years and years and years of intensive therapy. Like, I can't keep hoping for this. I just got to accept that it's never going to happen. And then, like,
Mm.
bam. Like, that's
But
what
look at him telling jokes to you
I
right now.
know. And so that's my message, I guess, for like all of the special needs parents. It's like,
Uh,
I know that sometimes it is absolutely tearing you apart
mm,
to keep hoping that your kid is going to improve and grow and talk and walk and I don't know, all the things, but like, don't give up hope.
yeah,
You never know what amazing things are going to happen.
absolutely. So I guess that's a very good story, especially to those who are listening right now, Kara. So I guess I'll just wrap up and thank you really for that very, very candid experience and profound moment that you've shared, especially dealing with your kids that are on the spectrum. So I'll just go through and fast track like the three fast things or stereotypes that I've seen online, and I'll just see if we agree, if you agree or disagree, and then like sort of provide me like one or two liners about it, why you agree or disagree, if that's okay with you. So yep, I'll pick one. So actually, this is from I actually researched this one just from Google. So first one is that children with autistic or autistic spectrum disorder cannot empathize. So would you agree on this one or disagree?
Oh, I totally disagree. Did you want to
That's
why?
good.
Or
Yeah,
just
yeah,
yes or no?
yeah.
Oh, I totally disagree. It might look a little different than you
Mm,
think. It might look a little different. It might take a little more work and it might take a little more pointing out. But absolutely,
mm.
they're totally capable of that.
That's good to hear. So I'll just jump off right away with the second one. So from this is another myth or stereotype. So autism is genetic by nature.
Yep.
Mm,
Oh yeah. Again, my husband is pretty sure he is on the autism spectrum. Other family members are. You could just you can just see it when you look. You can just
mm,
yeah, that one I firmly believe.
I see.
Just from personal experience, that one I
Mm-mm,
totally believe that one. And as
mm,
the reason that that one is difficult for people to believe is because we are so have such a hard time accepting that in ourselves.
yeah,
We have our parents' generation. Sorry, one second. We have such a hard time accepting that because we have a hard time seeing it in ourselves. And our
mm,
parents' generation, they were not like looking for it. And
mm.
so, what's really
That's true.
interesting is if you have kids with autism, look at your parents. Look at your
Ah,
parents
uh-huh.
and see if you can look at them and see any of those traits in them. Because when I started
Interesting.
doing that, it really opened my eyes.
Interesting, Kara. That's a good thing. So yeah, I guess I'll just jump off right away with the third one, so we can have this one wrap up. So the last one I have, Kara, is that individuals with autism are intellectually impaired. Would you agree or disagree on this one?
That is totally moot.
Mm,
Anybody can be intellectually impaired whether they have autism or not. Some people
mm.
with autism are intellectually impaired. Some people with autism are absolutely brilliant. So
Yes,
it
yes.
just depends. I mean, some people are, some people aren't. Like there are plenty of people with autism who are way smarter than me. My daughter is smarter than me.
Mm. So, yep, thank you, Kara, for being able to fast track with this one. And lastly, I just would like to ask you for like really how like tell us like give us a message most especially to those who will be listening this one, and also for the parents that are experiencing the same kind of thing and are about to really give up. What can you say to them? Like,
My
how
my
can you encourage them?
my favorite message of all is just don't give up. Um,
Mm,
so one of the things I said at the very beginning is I'm a singer songwriter. I actually have my album
mm.
coming out at the end of the month, and my one of my favorite songs that I wrote is called "Wait," and the chorus of it is
Mm,
"Maybe it is wait, Maybe it doesn't have to look the way they said it did.
Mm.
Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's not too late to change your mind or change the world. Don't give up just yet. Wait. Take a
Oh.
second and realize that you have a preconceived notion of the way that you are expecting things to be,
Mm.
and then open yourself up to the possibilities. And maybe there can still be success in a different way. Don't give up
That's
and allow things to look a little differently.
That's very beautiful. So, lastly, Kara, if you have anything to plug on, or if you have especially the music that you are working with, do you have anything to say before we're going to like really completely say bye to this conversation? I know probably Joshua is already around. I'm not
Not
sure.
quite. I have to go pick him up actually. My daughter just came in the door and she's playing with the dog, which is why
Mm,
I'm sitting and she's doing that. Um, yeah, like I said, I do have my album coming out, and so much of that is, centered around my kids and, life of a mom with special needs. So
mm.
definitely go check that out. My website's caroleegarrison.com, and you can just find everything on there if you want to go follow anything. You can pre-order my album now. It comes out on May 23rd. And thank you so much for this amazing conversation.
Thank you, Kara. It's really my pleasure. And don't worry, I'll put on your link for your music here once we were able to launch this one completely with a full episode. So it's
Thank you so
always a
much.
pleasure, really. It's my pleasure, Kara, to be able to have this conversation with you, most especially that this is something that's not very open here in my country. And hope that this one would shed lights to those people that are also struggling to find the right person to listen and the right person to get their strength. So, I will not be holding you too long, Kara. So send my regards to all your children,
I
especially to
will. Thank
Joshua.
you.
He's the most adorable one. So thank you so much, Kara, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Bye.
Yep, I am absolutely full on, hands down, to whatever Kara was able to do with everything that she's been through. I hope you guys will be able to share this episode to your friends. And I hope this would also help those that are of the same situation with Kara. Please make sure to subscribe to this channel. This has been Bits and Pieces, Binagmay of Binagbo. Spread love, spectacular people.